Hey guys, what's up? It's SrisavasdiLegacy with CinemAddicts. There are two sets of interviews for this installment, courtesy of Eric Holmes. He interviewed Chris Lamont and Joe Russo for their latest film, The Inheritance. These screenwriters, they're lifelong friends, and their previous credits together include The Locksmith, Hard Kill, not on IMDb right now, this is just from the Dome. Okay, Hard Kill, The Locksmith, what else did they do? The Au Pair Nightmare, which I really enjoyed. Russo also directed that movie, and I know I'm missing a couple of other movies. They have a ton of credits. The Inheritance, both Eric and I really loved it. Eric gave it 4.5 stars. I gave it 4 stars. In theaters and on demand. Currently, I will leave on the show notes a rent purchase Amazon link where you guys can go and rent or purchase The Inheritance, and it centers on a guy named billionaire Charles Abernathy, played by Bob Gunton. You might know him from his work in Shawshank Redemption. He was the big bad in the Shawshank Redemption. On the eve of his 75th birthday, Charles Abernathy, he invites his kids to his beautiful mansion, and he tells them unless by the stroke of midnight he will die. Someone is, or something, or whatever, he will be killed. But the problem is he wants to live. And unless, if he survives the night, if he makes it past 12, his kids will get their inheritance. If not, they will be cut out. If he's dead, they will be cut out from his will and they will be penniless. So on one hand, of course, he's our father. They want to save him. Also, they want to keep their respective inheritance. Along with Bob Gunton, it also stars Peyton List, Brianna Middleton, Rachel Nichols, Austin Stowell, David Walton, Reese Alexander, and Chris Wood. Running at 84 minutes. The genre is horror. The genre is horror, and in my review of The Inheritance, I was saying that it's great that it can be considered as a whodunit. I had not seen the trailer. I just feel like this movie, if it was promoted as a whodunit, that would have been cool because there would have been an extra twist to it as far as you're trying to figure out who is the culprit behind all of these murders. But the fact that there is a horror element to it, as the genre says, I don't know if that's too much of a spoiler. But anyways, it's a really interesting interview with Lamont and Russo that's coming up with Eric Holmes. And look, you're going to be hearing a lot of Eric Holmes' interviews moving forward, okay? So if you have any thoughts and suggestions on Eric Holmes or questions you want him to ask, or just comments in general about his discussions with these filmmakers and actors, hit him up at hamslime@gmail.com. So that's the first set of interviews. That's The Inheritance. And then rounding out the episode is an interview with creators and directors Misha Crosby and John Mawson. They created, and it took them 4 years to do this, they created the new, quote, audio movie series, Unsinkable. Now, this 11 episode series tells the story of the British tanker, the San Demetrio, one of the most extraordinary tales of heroism, fortitude, and seamanship of World War II. When the ship is attacked thousands of miles from home in enemy-infested seas, a raw young officer and a handful of desperate seamen fight to survive both against the elements and themselves. The voices on this audio movie series include Thomas Brody Sangster. You might know him from Queen's Gambit, Love Actually, and Maze Runner. There's also Succession star Brian Cox, Game of Thrones actress Natalie Emmanuel, John Malkovich, who, of course, in the line of fire and being John Malkovich, Harry Hamlin, and Blair Redwood. These are some of the voice actors involved in Unsinkable. It's currently available under the Wondery Plus History Tellers lineup. I will leave a link where you can actually start listening to this audio movie series. I prefer just calling it a podcast. They don't want to call it a podcast. They want an immersive movie experience via the audio form. Anyways, that's their thing, and they both worked really hard on this. Again, these are the creators, Misha Crosby and John Mawson, that is rounding out this installment of CinemAddicts. So here's the thing. I hope I get on this freaking schedule so Eric's interviews actually get some form of audio love on our CinemAddicts podcast feed. Hopefully this will be the start of something more down the road of Eric's interviews. So expect those things on a weekly basis. Again, you'll get our weekly CinemAddicts episode where we review films every Thursday, and then I'll pepper in Eric's interviews in different installments throughout the week, maybe 1 or 2 installments per week we'll see how the schedule goes. But again, it's been a couple of months that I've done this, and I apologize for not putting up more of Eric's stuff on the audio feed, on our audio feed for CinemAddicts, but also you can catch a lot of his stuff, a lot of his interviews on our Deepest Dream YouTube channel or our CinemAddicts YouTube channel as well. So support both those channels if you can. We're also available on Patreon, and I'll leave all those links on the show notes and yada, yada, yada. Hope you enjoy Eric's interviews. First up, Chris Lamont and Joe Russo for The Inheritance, followed by a beep, and then an interview with Unsinkable creators Misha Crosby and John Mawson. Thanks again, guys. Talk to you soon.
Am I recording? I think I'm recording. I hope I'm recording. Cool. I'm probably not recording, but either way, I'm here with Joe Russo and Chris Lamont. Joe Russo, we've had you on the show before, talked to you on Twitter and whatnot. Chris, I've not met you, so this is an absolute pleasure for me.
Once in a while, I let Chris out of the dark closet we keep him in. Once in a while.
Yeah, Eric, as the creative genius, really between the two of us, I mean, it's one of those things like, Joe doesn't want to, let me out too much. I'm also the better looking between the two of us as well. So, but I appreciate this opportunity to come up for air, to be honest.
No comment. I don't want to hear mom and dad fight in front of me. But yeah, it's good to have you guys on here. I was really excited, Joe, talking with you, because you guys have had some issues with in the past with like the scripts you've written and how they've turned out, some better than others. And this one, you're like, holy crap, this one's going to be so good. And your excitement got me excited, and I watched it and I loved it. So I guess let's just kind of talk about The Inheritance and why you're so damn excited about it and why I love it so much.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you loving it. We worked really, really hard on that script.
Yeah. No, Eric, obviously you've been such a great champion of us over the last couple of years and have followed our careers with interest. I think as what happens to screenwriters sometimes, when movies go into production, when producers get involved or directors get involved, the creative that's got everyone excited in the first place can start to take some left turns. We'll just say to be nice. And yeah, there's definitely a couple movies in our resume that we were very much not involved with the final product of those screenplays, but because of how the credit process works, and because we were involved in the earlier stages of those drafts, our names are on them. So, one of them in particular, I feel like is my albatross. I will carry it around with me forever.
To be fair, they never made open source, so I wouldn't count that.
That's true. Eric actually was so interested in Hard Kill and what happened that he read the original screenplay for open source.
Wow.
And I was absolutely heartbroken when I got done with them. Like, why didn't they make this movie?
That's a whole podcast in itself. But we did get to meet Bruce Willis. All right, to be honest, so
that was pretty cool. Yeah, and look, and it's probably Bruce's last real hit, creatively successful or not, financially, and on Netflix it was number 2. So it was cool to have met him. It was cool to get a movie that got made literally a month before COVID hit and put money in people's pockets, and then to be a part of probably Bruce's last real movie that charted. That was a nice thing. As frustrating as it was to watch what they did to our baby.
But fast forward to this project, right, Eric?
Yes. Why are we so excited about this one? Well, we were the only writers on this movie, and so we kind of were able to, while dealing with notes from producers and studio execs, and trying to do the best we could with those things. I would say of all the screenplays that I didn't direct, because Chris and I wrote a movie called The Au-Pair Nightmare, which I did, and we were able to kind of, I guess, protect the creative that way. Of all the movies we've handed off to other filmmakers, I would say this is the one that is probably the closest to the original core spec that we shot shopped around way back when. And so that in and of itself is a pretty gratifying thing.
Well, I thought that the producers, they like really valued our input, which sometimes doesn't happen. And they really appreciated the overall vision, what we brought to the table, and they really respected, where we were coming from, and they really wanted to engineer and bring it to life. And we were just so fortunate, when Alejandro came on board too, because he really appreciated the script and the source material and everything that we put into it. And all
that was a bit of a lucky break. There was a whole kind of director bake-off, and Alejandro was one of, I think, 12 directors who was competing for the job. And ultimately it came down to 3 choices, and they were all friends of mine. So I kind of had to just recuse myself from the process and let them decide. But it ended up being Alejandro, which was in a way a bit serendipitous, because 2 years prior to that, when Alejandro came over and watched the work prints of the Au Pair Nightmare to give notes on it, he basically, the movie ended and he turned to me and he was like, "That was pretty good." He goes, "What do you have that I can read?" And so I sent him 2 screenplays. I sent him our two of our Bloodless scripts, Soulmates. And I sent him The Inheritance, which at the time was called The Last Will and Testament of Charles Abernathy.
Which would have been a great title, don't you think, Eric? Like, that's the title that
it certainly would have been easier to Google.
Yeah, not 100 inheritances to wade through. But it's shorter for video on demand, I guess. That's what they tell us. But Alejandro and I had worked on a horror anthology that I produced called Nightmare Cinema together, and so we just had a good long-standing rapport. And actually, we tried to get both of those movies made with him. Soulmates, he was attached to direct for about a year and a half with a different company that ended up making it. And then, kind of actually during that process, the bake-off for Abernathy happened, and Alejandro jumped over to that project. So we had a filmmaker who was a champion of the material. We had a filmmaker who liked the material and was friends and had a good rapport with us. And so I think that just kind of set the stage for a good, fruitful, creative collaboration.
What are some traps that you've fallen into in the past that you've had a bunch of movies now? And so, like, the next movie after The Inheritance, like, you flag those traps now, and you're not going to step in those again. What's some that you can kind of point to other early filmmakers that might fall into the same sort of things?
I think the biggest thing is you want to make sure that everyone is making the same movie, or at least the people who are in the power to change that. We recently just went out with a screenplay to producers, and we took a bunch of meetings with different producers, and though they did not end up coming on for their slate was pretty full and it was more of a thriller than a horror movie, but the Radio Silence guys were like, "This is a movie, and like whoever you end up making it with, make sure you pick someone who is making the movie you want to make." And so it really came down to kind of 2 choices. And one of the producers wanted to open that screenplay up for a lot of development. And the other one was very much like, "I love what you guys did. Here are a couple thoughts to make it better," but very much in the same pocket of what we tried to do. And so we ultimately went with that producer, which I think in the long term, whether it gets made or it doesn't, or whatever happens, that just being over that first hurdle, I think, is just probably the biggest creative step you can take to making sure the end product is reflective of your original vision.
But I think also the other thing is that you just have to also be realistic about the work that you do and that the way that this business works, because sometimes the producer is just going to like the material, they're going to buy the script, and with the Guild you do get some revisions, but ultimately at the end of the day, I feel like it's all about the respect that Joe talks about, and that trust, and really a producer who wants to collaborate with you are the best ones. It's not just a question of my way or the highway. Someone who, any producer that believes in the collaborative creative vision of what this medium is, those are the ones that you want to try and work with as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, we got lucky on this movie. Paul Schiff is just a legendary producer. I mean, he was a producer on My Cousin Vinny. Like
Nice.
he's just got like just an amazing roster of credits, and nothing rattled that guy. I mean, he because he's seen it all, you know. So whatever notes we were getting from the studio, he was very even keeled about and kind of, you know, held our hands and Alejandro's hands through that process. I mean, we have one studio exec we came out of this process who we just adore and love and can't wait to work with again. You know, and then there was another one who didn't like horror. And why they were involved, I don't know, but that's just sometimes how the studio system, I think, ends up shaking out. So, you know, you try to balance those personalities, and you hope that you have enough players in the court of the creative to kind of navigate through those challenges.
Yeah. And Chris, I saw an interview with you and you were talking about some issues you had with Dead Alive. And you mentioned you were talking about when you're going to make a movie, you want to kind of get your distributor in line before.
Yeah,
can you kind of speak a little more on that?
Yeah, I mean, that, you know, that was a project where, and that was a long time ago, Eric. I give kudos for you for digging stuff like that up. But, you know, that was a project where, you know, when I originally started getting into film, and I was producing as well as directing and writing, what I realized is that it's not just about the love of the craft and the making of the project and bringing that to life. You have to really understand that this is a business. And I think a lot of filmmakers, when they first started, just so enamored by the idea of making a movie that they don't see it through to what it really needs to do. Is it needs to find a distributor. It needs to find an audience, and you need to find a distributor that is going to want to get the film out, because you don't make films for yourself. I feel like you make your films for an audience. And the only way it's going to be able to reach an audience is by finding a distributor. So I think it's important to do some research as a filmmaker, to be able to find out who are the distributors are that are making the kind of films or releasing the kind of films that you want to make. And just really kind of being a more objective and business-like when it comes to making your movies, because everyone loves making films, but it's the business part that really starts to, you know, drag people down. And when you start talking about like M&E and, you know, doing your captioning and all that stuff for distribution, that if you're not aware of, that it can you can get caught. So it's great to have a relationship with distributors. Find those that are like in the genre that you're looking for, and ask them, like, what are you looking for? And making open queries to them about pitches and scripts and specs and that kind of thing. Maybe. So I always feel like it just, you know, it's about being a business person as well as being an artist. And it's a very tricky balance that I think that we all have to do in this industry to be successusable.
Yeah, I think at the same, you know, just to add on that, it's the same answer that we just gave you with when we were meeting with those producers. You want to find someone who wants to make the same movie that you do, and ideally, if it's a studio or a distributor, that they have a track record of releasing, you know, movies that are in the spirit of the movie you want to make.
Yeah. You just don't want to have a film that you make and you put your blood, sweat, and tears and resources and time into, and have it just sit in their catalog, sit in the back of their catalog without it being, you know, promoted. You know, so I mean, it's finding, you know, great distributors, great fits for that. And it's the same with producers. It's really just trying to find a great fit for everybody creatively and in the business side of things as well. And it's just being aware of this. You just can't go in with blinders because you love making movies.
And probably one that won't rip you off either. Oh, you only got one view. Here's your $1. Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you know, look, we had a movie that a producer tried to self-distribute, and we all kind of knew that was going to be a mistake, and we just watched them spectacularly fail at it the whole way, and that's really tough. You know, we're excited to be working with Vertical again on the Inheritance. They did Hard Kill, and they did a wonderful job releasing that movie, regardless of what I think of what they did to what the producers did to the screenplay. Vertical did a great job releasing that movie. I mean, it played like a I was told it played like a blockbuster on video on demand, and it was #2 on Netflix, and so
went all over the world.
yeah. So we're excited to be working with them again on this too. We hope for similar success.
Also, another thing, I mean, this is kind of in the past, but I think this is important. There was a writer's strike not too long ago, and you guys were out picketing, doing the
Well,
yeoman's work.
One of us was out picketing.
Well,
Joe, well, I was back. I live in Phoenix, Eric, so I was back here doing a lot of TV interviews. And every time I asked Joe, should I come out? Joe said, "Do you want to walk around in a circle for 6 hours in the hot sun?" And I said, "I'm just going to keep doing interviews and doing my things here then." So,
well,
but Joe was a real champion, during the guild, during the strike. He really carried the torch for not only myself, but for so many other writers with his social media influence and getting the word out. And it was pretty amazing, everything that Joe did. His outreach was, I think, crucial to the strike being resolved, honestly.
well, regardless, during the strike, there's a bunch of people like, oh, the movies are going to come out, the film business is going to fail, and why don't you just fold? And but you stuck to it. Writers, got a deal. One would say historic deal, like the Directors Guild. But it's been some time now. What's kind of Hollywood hasn't fallen apart yet. What's kind of the benefits that the writers have now that they didn't before? That thanks to people like you.
Yeah, I mean the keywords. Yeah, no, I think what people don't realize before the strike is when the guild makes a decision like they're going to call for the membership to vote for a strike. It's because they've been doing a lot of research, looking at where the trends are going, and it became very clear that the streaming bubble had burst in 2022, and that there was going to be a contraction, and that meant less jobs. And so what tends to happen during a contraction, if you're a major corporation, is you're going to try to find places to cut costs. And jobs are one way to do it. And then also because we're essentially independent contractors on every screenplay or movie we're hired to work on, they're going to try and see if they can try to find other ways to suppress those wages. And so the goal of the strike, I think, really truly was, how do we protect the jobs that will exist after the streaming bubble bursts? It wasn't about saving every job, which I think was the kind of, troll narrative that you saw on social media was, you're all going to be unemployed. And it's like, well, yeah, some of us will, but the people who do get a job, who do get the next job, they will have a better job to get when it does finally happen. So I think that was kind of that's been the kind of how the narrative was skewed. But if you want to get into the specifics, we can. They're a little dry for a promoting a movie podcast, but happy to talk about it if you want.
Well, one of the things that was I thought was a big sticking point was AI. People were talking about that like it's not even that big of a deal. Just say yes and move on. And yet here we are a couple months later, and it seems like every week almost there's a new story about AI doing this, AI doing that, AI doing that.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
had that strike not happen, you guys would be out of a job like right now, because Hollywood would have just went right for that.
I mean, look, again, I think corporations they're not looking out for their employees. They're looking out for their investor and Wall Street bottom lines. So, yeah, I mean, naturally, if AI can replace human labor and save them money, then that makes sense to look for the profits of the company. But obviously, I think and we know, and I think a lot of people who have been paying attention to the AI slop that's out there, is it's not good and it's not ready to replace humans. And in all likelihood, because it's just regurgitating information, basically, it probably never will be good enough on its own to replace a human. And so we got very lucky that this started to catch fire right before the strike. I mean, the timing was really serendipitous. And I do think that in time, in 2008, everyone said, why are you striking over the internet? Why are you striking over the internet? There's no money there, blah, 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 blah. And then lo and behold, because we did, we were able to get, union deals on streaming shows and movies. So it was very forward thinking. And I think in time, people will look back on this strike when it comes to AI as being kind of the first real line drawn in the sand of human resistance against the machines.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I also teach screenwriting at Arizona State University, and what the Guild did with this agreement is it's laying the groundwork for the future. And so I look at my students and all of their budding screenwriters, and they will all benefit down the road from everything the Guild did. It was a historic strike. Yes, it took a lot out of the writers for sure, but it's not just about us. We also are a pay it forward industry. And so we kind of laid the groundwork, I think, for writers to be successful for a really long time.
Yeah. So I guess we can get back to the Inheritance. At the heart, this is a murder mystery. What's the and you got two different writers, so maybe both have different ways of going about this. But with the murder mystery, it's whodunit. Is that not the first thing you got to think about, and then just kind of backwards engineer the rest of the script? How does that go about?
Yeah, I mean, luckily in this instance, we kind of knew who the whodunit was, I think, from the jump. So there was never really for us, there was never a question about who done it, and it was more the why and the how. And then once we kind of knew where we were going to end up, from a thematic perspective, like how can this character's journey, do what we want to do and accomplish what we want from a thematic perspective, then yeah, we started working backwards and figuring out how do we kind of, weave an engaging mystery, and kind of take the players off the table in a way that just builds toward this kind of natural confrontation between basically our characters that essentially represent the core themes of the movie.
And then, so when you're writing, what's I guess this question for both of you about the other one, what's like a scene or a line that's like, for Chris, it'd be like, oh, that scene is totally Joe, or Joe, that line is totally Chris. Like what, or does that all just kind of meld together and you guys can't even answer that?
I gotta tell you, Eric, I mean, Joe is my second wife, and I believe he feels the same about me. We finish each other's sentences. We honestly do. It's an incredible mind meld. We've been working together for so long now, and it's hard to, we're going through, because we go through these scripts so much. I mean, we lay out the outline, we lay out the beats. Joe starts going in, and then we're exchanging pages back and forth, and it's amazing, honestly, where we're going through, and I'm like, Joe, that was a really, I know, that's a Joe line. I'm like, that was a great line. And then sometimes Joe will say, oh, I like that line that you came up with. So it's really nice to get that feedback from him. But seriously, we just work together so well. My gosh, is it 27 scripts now?
No,
Joe?
it's not that many. Jesus Christ. But it's
with the pilots.
I think the one we just finished, if I remember counting correctly, is our 20th feature. So yeah, we've been writing a lot for a long time. But I think by the time we're done, if we do it right, there's definitely, I would say, the majority of the script, it becomes ubiquitous. Like, I don't know what Chris did, and he doesn't know what I did. There might be like a couple things here and there. And then sometimes we argue about who came up with those things, and we go back to an old draft to figure it out.
That's Joe who does that, Eric. Okay, I never do that. It really is.
It's usually, boy, someone really didn't like this line. Who came up with those? And I'll be like, it wasn't me. I have the receipts. Anyway, no, I definitely think there's Chris is right. There's a bit of a mind meld process that if we do it right by the end of the draft, and we've really gone through and talked about every line like we usually do, it becomes pretty seamless. And that's, I think, what you want. You don't want it to feel like there's two voices competing. You want it to feel like one voice.
Yeah.
I like that. That was really good.
Yeah. Also, Joe, I'm a fan of Hollywood Hangover, and you're producing a short by your co-host Chris Price.
Yeah. Yeah.
When's that coming out? When can we watch that?
It's playing the festival circuit right now. It just played in New York a couple weeks ago. It's playing in Burbank, I think in September. We're hoping to, reveal some more festivals soon, but it's a little politically minded. So I think we're going to try to hopefully get it out right before the election. That's the plan, is to maybe put it online before the election. So that was fun. That was we were in the middle of the strike, and pretty much the only thing you could do was make short films, and so it was nice to be able to throw some IATSE crew members some money. And I think they were really grateful to just not be sitting around, actually doing what they love to do, which is like be on set. And it was just a really fun weekend, despite the fact that we shot through Los Angeles's great hurricane. It was the day we had a hurricane and an earthquake. Don't recommend that. But movie
Getting a
making,
terrible Yelp review from me.
yeah. I mean, it sounds like an awesome movie though, hurricane. But I would not recommend making a movie during a hurricane, if you can help it.
Yeah. And then Chris, you said you live in Phoenix. What kind of stuff you got going on? You said you're a teacher, and I apologize, I don't remember, but you were in like a film
He's the founder
festival
of the Phoenix Film Festival.
There you go.
Yep.
I don't live in Phoenix. I don't know these things.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, no, I founded the Phoenix Film Festival. I'm on the honorary board right now, and that's been super successful. It's always great to see the collaborations that come from that. It's actually going to its 25th year, and so we're very proud of how that has become a cultural touchstone here in the Valley, and working with Joe. And there's always things going on. It's I think the important thing to do is wherever you're at, you always need to be creative. You always need to be creating. You can't just sit around on your laurels and wait for things to happen. You have to be proactive in everything that you do. That's how you become successful in this world.
Yeah. Well, Inheritance in select theaters on demand, July 12th. Definitely, this just seems like would just be an absolute banger. Just fun watching with a giant crowd in the theater. So I would definitely recommend that. But if you got to watch on demand, hey, double feature with Soulmates. That's what I say.
I love that idea. I think that's a great plan. Soulmates and the Inheritance back to back.
But yeah, Chris, Joe, awesome talking with you guys, and hopefully we'll do it again soon. And
Thank you,
everyone go check out The Inheritance. I am here with Misha Crosby and John Mawson, writer and directors of Unsinkable, an audio movie. This thing was really interesting. I thought I was getting I didn't quite read all the things. I thought I was getting a movie screener, and I hit the first episode. I'm like, oh, this is audio. Oh, this is cool. And right away, I noticed the ambition of this because I've heard other kind of similar things, but this is really action heavy. What were kind of some of the challenges in putting this together?
Well, the biggest challenge was we were recording in COVID. That was first. We had 37 actors doing over 100 roles, everyone pretty much in individual studios or recording in their home studios over the course of several months. That was the first big challenge.
Mm-hmm. And then piecing it all back together, what we had, because we recorded all those roles individually, was no, well, one performance where that was the case. But other than that, no real scenes where, oh, we've got the response coming up here. We had a team in London and worked through, multiple different takes, multiple different performances to put that back into a coherent piece.
And so when you write a movie, just in the writing process, when you write a movie, there's dialogue lines and there's action lines, and you can get away with a lot with the look. In this, you don't have that. You have to do a lot of exposition, which normally is the thing in movies that people hate, but in this, it's necessary. So how do you get around that and keeping it as action heavy as you do?
Well, it started out with a movie script. I originally wrote the movie script. People who read it said it would make a great TV series. So I then expanded it up because there's so much story to tell into a limited season TV series. And then when we started thinking about doing it as an audio piece, I had to rewrite every scene for the ear and take it from the eye to the ear and do that without exposition, without someone saying, and then we went to here, or what are you doing now? And that was the challenge, and it took months. But I think as you hear, we achieved it. We have no narration in any of the episodes at all beyond the very opening statement from Brian Cox. This is a story of an ordinary cargo ship. And so that was the challenge. And as a writer, I had a lot of input from Misha and from our co-producers in London, Jack Bowman and Andrew Mark Sewell and Helen Quigley. And they would sort of come back with notes saying, not quite getting this, or how about saying that? And we refined it and refined it and refined it and turned it into the 11 episodes we now have.
And how do you...
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, really, instead of show, don't tell, it became hear, don't tell, if possible. With really... exposition when it's necessary, and of course, you need to say some things out to create a picture. And if you can get the dialogue to come across with that, where it's actually a natural thing for somebody to have said, all the better.
Yeah, you can't just have the character push the button because you'll hear a click and not know what that is. But you also have to get away where I'm going to push the button now. It's like, how do we do that without sounding lame?
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And we cast very carefully to make sure that we have very individual sounding actors, so that you knew who you were with. There was never, is it this guy? Is it that guy? As you listen, you'll realize that, we were very careful about that. We also had the most fantastic input from our composer, Stephen Endelman, who made sound, if you like, themes for every ship, for all the major characters had their own themes. So quite often you won't even realize it, but you're listening to someone and maybe it's their theme, or it's a version of their theme or of the ship's theme. And then on top of that, we had the most amazing sound design done by an Oscar-winning team. I'll let Misha tell you about that.
We worked extensively with Jimmy Boyle's team over in London. Jimmy's probably pretty famous for his work in Band of Brothers, a World War II show on HBO, of course. He had this amazing library of World War II sound effects that we were able to draw from. We also had Ben Wilkins and Sean Higgins. Ben, he did very well with his work on Whiplash. He won the Academy Award for it, in fact. And they then went and put this into Atmos after we'd gone through that initial sound design and mixing process.
Was there any sort of like a test that you did, like maybe like just like a 3-minute trailer version of this, or did you just go all in, just go for it?
No, it's funny you mentioned that. When this was first brought to us and the suggestion was made around COVID, hey guys, you're gonna have to put the brakes on this feature film. We're gonna spend a long time developing, putting the cast together and all of that. Why don't you do this as an audio movie? John and I had no idea what the hell an audio movie was, and it was something that then, before we took on this endeavor, we wanted to see whether that was going to be viable. And so John and I went away. He punched up about sort of a 5-6 minute script, right? In which then we said, well, let's just go out to some local actors in LA and have them record this. We'll put it back together. I'll throw on some sound design, some music, et cetera, et cetera. And let's just see if this can flow. Let's see if this can work as an idea. And it's also, just as importantly, let's see if this can work with action and big scenes like that. Because sometimes when it's not entirely dialogue driven, you're worried about whether that can play for the ear. And so we did a little test, and it was successful enough for us to think then that we could pull off the whole thing.
I think something like this would work really well for like people with visual impairments. I wonder if this is something you could go for, like adapting other movies, other action movies specifically, that someone that's blind, they wouldn't be able to enjoy fully because it's just explosions and gunshots, but something that's more immersive, such as this.
Well, we've been told this a lot. A lot of people have said this would be great for people with hearing difficulties or completely deaf. And actually, one of the things we've talked about doing is putting this into movie houses. Turning it into a full, instead of episodic, turning it into a full-length film, effectively, and having people with hearing difficulties not having to have the earpiece on that does somebody with the audio description, but just sit back in the comfortable chairs and listen to let the sound tell the story for them. So it is actually something we're actively thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
You also on IMDb, there's a credit for Valerie. I'm gonna mess up the last name. Nikityuk, I believe, has a visual effects credit.
VFX artist, yeah.
How does that work for this? Because I'm kind of confused by that.
In the trailer, which you may or may not have seen, I wanted to make sure that we had some visual representation there as well to show people what this world represented, at least for us in some moments. And so, yeah, there was some VFX work that happened to create that, and it was one of the team that helped with that.
As far as the rest of the crew, I mean, everyone that works in the sound are the stars of the show here. You must have, what was it like getting the crew together? Because you got to get like the top brass in to pull off something that you did with this.
Well, we decided when we started casting, we just decided to aim for the very top. We put our cast wish list together, and we started at the very top. Mm-hmm. And we were lucky enough, in strange ways, we didn't know it at the time. We were lucky enough, of course, that it was COVID. Everyone's sitting at home in lockdown, nothing to do. And stars that would normally be booked solid for years and not really interested in spending a day on an audio piece like for the money we could offer, had nothing to do and started to come on board. And their agents got behind it. The more they heard about it, even these top agents, they were like, oh, this is interesting. And it's something we could do. And sure, we're still doing our job. And it was Brian Cox who was the first big name to come on board. And when we talked to him about it in the studio, we said, what attracted you to this? And he was kind enough to say that he loved the script and was fascinated by the story and the role, which was not something that he usually gets to play. But he'd also spent the first 9 years of his career in a radio play, and he loved the medium. And that's why people came on board. And to a man and a woman, they all said the same thing, is that you create the character yourself. You don't have to worry about green screens or costumes or what they're going to do in post. You just create the character and the circumstance and the scene in your mind and go for it.
And so I've seen there's 11 episodes. I've heard 5 of them for this interview. What goes into the process of and this may be towards the writing stage where you find out the breaks? And is there any plans of doing like a Kill Bill, the whole bloody affair, just having it 1 3.5 hour long deal without any breaks in it?
Initially, it was thought that we may go ahead and do that and come out like with one long piece, as it were. But we spoke to some partners who, quite frankly, done a lot more audio than us. And podcasting has, of course, become more and more popular. And whilst we will never brand this as a podcast, it will certainly be available on podcast formats, right? And for that to be more consumable, we went away. John worked very hard. We had a development team on it as well, with me and Andrew Sill from B7 Media and Jack Bowman from Audio Marvels, and wanted to make sure that each of those segments then had their own self-sustained arcs with cliffhangers, as it were, between each one to keep that story going and keep that story gripping.
Yeah. And I usually save this for the end, but we should probably talk about it now. This launches July 10th, but this is not in theaters, I imagine. Like, what's the release schedule of this, and like, how can people find this?
It's going out on Wondery Plus. The first 2 episodes are going to be coming out together, and they'll be available worldwide. But from the 10th onwards, every week, the following episodes will come out on a weekly basis at Wondery Plus. We're being launched really as the flagship of what they're calling their American History Tellers series. So there will be other ones coming out, other titles coming out, and it'll be with Wondery Plus and on the subscription service for 90 days, and after that, it will be available worldwide again.
And again, this is a really cool experience. Do you guys have any plans in the future for other audio movies?
We'll see. This was a big endeavor.
It's taken us 4 years to get this far.
Well, I guess I should ask, do you want to do another one of these, or is it like too much of a challenge where it's like, nope, one and done? Or
I mean, listen, we've had a history, both of us, in film and television for quite some time, and that takes an immense amount of work to put projects like that together. For anyone considering audio, I would say it's by no means not an immense amount of work. There's still a lot that it takes to put these productions together, especially if you're taking on directing, and John and I actually voice characters in it as well. Yes, there's less moving around, less location shifts, less makeup, less hair, a lot of other things that have to go into that. But certainly, no, it's a mountain to climb to put these things together. And whether we go on that, it's a big decision to make. But if we do, it'll be with a project that we entirely believe in.
And we've worked together on visual media projects. So in fact, how we met was on a short film that I wrote and made back in the day, and cast Misha. We've worked together on a film called Green Rush that Misha was a producer on, and actor, and I was a co-exec and did a little bit of work on. And we've got other projects that we've put together, and this obviously we would love to see made or get involved in making in the visual sphere as a movie or as a TV series.
What kind of?
I was going to say that was the plan initially. Datura were going to take John's script and develop that into a feature film to release. But when COVID came, of course, we changed tracks with that, and so that initial feature film script, which was initially the Sound of Nitro, it evolved into what we now see as Unsinkable. Constantly, we were able to keep developing alongside John's TV series version, which was a 5 or 6 part episodic initially. Is it still in a 5-part iteration, John?
5-part at the moment, yeah. I mean, I was able to expand the story. There's an extraordinary court case, as you have heard, start to come out. If you've heard the first episodes, which took place just after the event on the ship itself, a couple of months later, which in itself is a fascinating story and part of it. And so the original for movie version, I didn't have time to get into that. But of course, once I expanded it up into a longer TV version, then I was able to bring in that court experience, that court case. So, that's why we have the full 3.5 hours. It's a big story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I love courtroom dramas just in general. In fact, one of my favorite movies last year was K Mutiny Court Martial, and this has kind of a lot of similar DNA. What were some inspirations when making this?
Well, in fact, a lot of it is taken from the transcripts of the court case itself, the actual court case that took place. And in my time, I originally was at sea in the Merchant Navy. I was a deck officer, which is how I knew about this story, and also was able to bring some technical expertise to the story. But after that, I spent a lot of years in the marine insurance and claims world, and I've been in court, with court cases like this in London. So I kind of know the setup and the style and the framing and the way it works. But as I say, a lot of it was down to the actual story and the court law reports themselves. I was lucky enough to get my good friend Hugh Fraser on board as the Justice Langton, and of course he's a fantastic actor and nailed being the judge, as well as the actors who played the lawyers, Nick Hutchison and James. It was like fantastic to be able to create that world. And obviously it's very easy for us, or it was one of the easier jobs we had in terms of moving from place to place, is instantly when you're back in a courtroom.
Right. And in addition to that, it gave us a very useful home base, as it were, to keep the story going from a place of, here's where we are and here's what's happening, without the need for constant exposition. If somebody's asking in court, what happened next? Where did we go in the actual drama, without us having to sort of blare out with a narrator, it ended up being a much more elegant way for us to be able to use that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Actually, it was a great way to get through to move the story forward. And you will have heard, for example, I think in episode 1, even. In episode 1, a lawyer saying to the captain, who is actually I play, what was going on the ship, and we have a montage of going around the ship and hearing what the different things are going on in the engine room and in the radio room and in the galley. Well, obviously, visually, that's what I wrote. But how do you do that in the audio sphere? Well, you have to do it the same thing, but to set it up, I had the lawyer ask the question and have the captain describe it in court.
And so you guys have both worked, obviously, in movies and television. What are some techniques in that translate well to Unsinkable? And then what are some other techniques in visual storytelling that just do not translate at all?
Good drama is always good drama, right? If you've got the essence and the basis of the truth being played, that's going to translate, I think, not only just across any medium, maybe for a traditional story, but art in general. There are technical things that just weren't going to work, in terms of what can work. visually and not. Like, I think we talked a little bit about the exposition side of things and show don't tell. There are some things that just the picture can speak 1,000 words for. And so from that aspect, really, really very different. The setting up the production itself, right? Being able to do this how we did, whilst I'm not going to say that was the most ideal world in the world because of what had happened with COVID, but it was workable, right? To be able to utilize things like Source Connect and have a high fidelity connection down to the other side of the world and still be able to monitor performances. Technically, that still plays, right? We wouldn't necessarily have to travel to, whether it be Prague where Natalie was, or Thomas were, or the UK where Thomas and some of the other casts were. And so some of those aspects I think totally play, and others don't.
All right. Well, we have a What's in the Box segment. I'll wrap up with this. We have a What's in the Box segment on the show. And each week we have a box of movies and we'll pull one to watch for the following week. And these are movies that are either personal to you or a movie that's like, that's really good and no one talks about it. What's a movie each of you would like to put into the box?
One of my favorite go-to movies, which I think is a perfection, particularly as a seafarer, is Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World. I think it's a really, really great movie. It is shot so beautifully. Every frame is like an oil painting. It's just beautiful. The sound, the music they choose and play, the action scenes, the ships themselves. Yeah, I can just fall into that anytime.
It was actually a movie that I watched again recently, and I'm still just astounded at how well Alex Garland put it together. It's Ex Machina. It feels so relevant as ever right now. And then when you think that movie was all put together in 2014, and the themes and the issues it goes through, couldn't seem more relevant right now.
Well, those are great picks, and I look forward to watching both of them again. It's always a good excuse to do so. So Unsinkable coming out July 10th on Wondery Plus. Yep. John, Misha, thanks for joining me. And everyone go, I would go watch Unsinkable, but go listen to Unsinkable and sink yourself into it. It's really great. And congratulations on both of you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.